Welcome back to the Franklin Planner Podcast. I'm John Harding, your host. I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you for listening. Today, we'll focus on leading your life and creating your best life, as well as helping lead your team. And I am delighted today to be joined by the distinguished guest, Dr. Breck England. Breck, thank you for joining us. Great to be with you.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, John. You're a great guy, and I'm happy to be part of this.
Well, thank you. For those that don't know Breck, I'm going to maybe just push here a little and do a little longer introduction than Breck may want, but I think it's really important because it is really a great opportunity to have Breck with us. So let me introduce him. I'm just thrilled to welcome someone here with us today that has been a trusted friend, mentor, a colleague for many years. Dr. Breck England and I worked shoulder to shoulder together in a number of organizations that kind of line up. And we did it through what I would call formative seasons of our careers. We partnered at Shipley Associates. We also worked together at Franklin Quest Consulting Group at Franklin Quest, then on to FranklinCovey, where we focused our work on really helping build leadership, communication, execution, productivity type solutions that ended up really influencing people around the world. And I'm hoping, Breck, you'll share some of your experiences there. Breck is one of the most versatile and insightful thinkers I know. He co-authored The Third Alternative with Stephen R. Covey, has shaped global presentation, leadership, communication methodologies at FranklinCovey. He has written significant works in kind of for me, a broad set of subjects: leadership, scripture, history, and even fiction. In addition to his published works, Breck is a gifted voice in the podcast world. He currently hosts and has hosted several inspiring series, including The Bright and Morning Star, Encircled in the Arms of His Love, The Dews of Heaven, each exploring scripture through the lens of truth and light and deeper spiritual understanding. His ability, and this is something I've seen firsthand through the years, to bring clarity and insight, whether in the boardroom, a classroom, or behind the microphone, continues to lift and strengthen thousands of listeners. Now, I know that Breck is an amazing father, husband, grandfather, and friend. Many have known him in a professional setting. That I'll just conclude with this, that Breck has truly had an enormous effect on leaders for good around the world, and certainly on me. Today we get to sit down with Breck here and dive into some of his most recent thinking and wisdom that he brings. And I'm just honored to be with you here, Breck. So sorry to give you just maybe a little more than you're comfortable with there as an introduction. Was that okay?
Well, it was barely adequate. You could say so much more.
Well, great to be with you. Breck and I have planned ahead, and he has recently written a white paper that tells this unique story of a woman by the name of Margot. And our hope and goal is that as listeners today, you can hear Margot's story, and what Breck has done has woven this in with a pathway and principles, the mindset truly related to how to tap into the greatness in you and how to lead your life, and also principles and strategies of how you can lead your team. And Breck, what I would love for you to do, and through this, tell some of your stories, is walk us through this great work you've done and tell us about Margot and teach us, if you will, the principles that have stood out to you, that have impressed you through your career. And maybe it's worth a second mention. If you didn't pick it up in the background on Breck, he is an expert in the Franklin Planner system, in the principles. He is a teacher. I did fail to mention he's a PhD in English from the University of Utah, also holds a master's degree. He was an adjunct professor for several years at the Marriott School of Business. And so he's kind of got this calling as a teacher, calling as a consultant, calling as a leader. And he kind of brings that to this white paper. So, Breck, please take off and tell us about Margot and teach us what you feel might be helpful today.
Good. Okay. Thanks. John, Margot is a symbol of the position a lot of people are in. Probably most of us are in. She's overwhelmed. Okay. She's in that season of life where things are just squeezing her. Okay. She's when she got out of school, she was excited to go into the workplace and do good work, and she was doing really well. And her boss announced he was going to retire, and he wanted her to take his place. Oh, how flattering, right?
Yeah.
This is great. I'm going to be the boss now. And that made her really excited until she realized that it was an impossible job. No one had ever taught her to be a manager, right? And you've heard of the famous principle where people get, promoted to the point of their incompetence. And
We've seen
that's been
that a
true of
lot.
me a lot of
Yeah.
times in my life. I've been promoted regardless of whether I was competent or not, and it has often been a price to pay. But anyway, Margot is one of those people who's got promoted to a point where she didn't know what she was doing. Okay, she was in over her head. And aren't you? Are you in
Yeah.
over your head? Isn't
Always.
everybody who's
Always.
listening? Isn't everybody who's listening kind of in over your head? Ask me if I'm in over my head.
Are you in over your head?
I'm in over my head, John. But in Margot's case, she was suddenly in charge of everything. She's in charge of recruiting, training, scheduling, making human resources decisions, dealing with endless complaints from customers and employees. And on top of all that, she's got a family, right?
You got a
She's
personal
got
life. Yeah.
yeah. She's told her husband she should have been a firefighter because she's running from one fire to another all day long. Um, Things at home are tough. She hardly ever sees her husband. He's got a big job too, keeps him crazy busy. They got two kids. As you know, raising children is primarily a logistical issue, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, and they need time to keep. Okay, so Margot knows that her life is out of control. Ask me if my life is out of control.
Your life is not out of control, Breck.
It's not as out of control as some others, maybe, but she had no idea how to get back into control. And then, okay, this might sound kind of commercial, quacky, um, kitschy, but it's really true that when you hear about and learn about the Franklin Planner system, something happens. Um, After a while of using it, the squeeze becomes a little less of a squeeze. Things start to make sense. You start to be able to manage things pretty well, but there's a deeper aspect to it, and that is you feel like you're actually pursuing a life that is meaningful. Okay. The meanings of things are what you're pursuing instead of trying to put out fires all over the place all day long, all your life, until you just burned out yourself, right?
Right.
Campfires have a way of spreading, okay? And pretty soon you've got a firestorm on your hands. And for a lot of people, that's their life, isn't it? Have you
Well, it
ever
is.
felt like your life is a firestorm?
And it seems like no matter what your age is, there's plenty of information and things that come at you, no matter. And in this case, Margot has this focused thing, but it does seem like something everyone deals with.
Yeah, there's this funny cliche that when you're retired, it all, settles down. Well, I'm retired now. Guess what?
You are busy.
It's worse than it was before. Okay, in a lot of ways. All right. So Franklin Planner System. Well, Margot, in her case, she met somebody who had a she had a friend who had a this little beautiful little sleek small book. Okay. And her friend said, "This is my secret." That sounds kind of silly. Okay. That's like sometimes if you're like me and sometimes you watch dumb old TV shows at night and there's a commercial of a guy that comes on and says, "Hey, this pill, or this my catheter changed my life." Okay, this changed my life, and you hear all these, "This changed my life," and you go, "How could that change your life?" Well, in the case of the Franklin Planner system, it really does. I mean, I'm not trying to be commercial or kitschy or anything. It really does. Okay. And that was the beginning of her transformation. When she figured out the Franklin Planner system, she gradually started to gain control. And the fires never died out, right? But she wasn't so focused on fires all the time because of a lot of things that she did in the system uh, prevented fires from breaking out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're saying she learned about this and started to learn about it when, and this is probably where you're headed, but what did she do differently? What happened that changed her?
Now, before we answer that question, I want you to answer a few questions about your own life. What matters most to you, and how will you achieve it? Second question, what do you want your life to be like? Maybe at the end of this year, or 5 years from now, or 10.
Right.
Here's a third question. How are you deciding day to day what to do with your time? And here's a
Or not deciding, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And here's a fourth question. How do you feel at the end of each day? Do you feel like, contented and peaceful, or do you just feel weary and burned out? Now, those are big questions, kind of hard to answer, but I'll tell you what the key benefits of the Franklin Planner system are in relation to those questions. First of all, you do end up achieving what matters most to you. Is that valuable? Is there
Yeah,
anything more
and
valuable than that?
with who matters most, right? It's kind of a blend, the same thing maybe.
Yeah. Second, you really do make your life count, not just in the short term, but the long term. And third, day to day, you control your schedule instead of your schedule controlling you. And fourth, your days become peaceful instead of just busy. Okay. Now, when I was actively working, like people would come into my office and say, "Hey, Breck, I know you're busy. I'm sorry to interrupt you." I could honestly say, "I'm not too busy to talk to you." Do you know how odd that is? People kind of go, "What? Everybody's too busy to talk to me."
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not. I'm never too busy to talk to you. And it really surprised people. Of course, I have my own priorities, but one priority that I really have is my love for people, my desire to be, useful and helpful to people. Okay.
Right.
Not just burning up the landscape with stuff to do.
I like what you said about your retirement. And before you jump into this, let me just ask you, like, why do you think that is? Why are you even continuing your time is so important. Did you think it would be different? Because you kept a pretty heavy workload full time at FranklinCovey and over head writer and innovation. W- What happens? I'm not retired, so I'm very interested.
A lot of your focus changes, but on a day-to-day basis, but you still have your governing values. And that's what makes the Franklin Planner system what it is. And that's why the system really does change your life. I'm still focused on my deepest values, as I have tried to be all along. My deepest values uh, are my love for people and my love for learning and my love for teaching. I value all of these things very deeply. And so I manage my life so that I'm constantly trying to fulfill, constantly trying to live up to those values. And so it's not that you're less occupied. You're
Right.
in retirement. I'm just as occupied as I was before. I am occupied in fulfilling those values,
Awesome.
just in different ways.
I love
Make
it.
sense?
I love it.
And with the Franklin Planner system is based on the productivity pyramid, which is kind of a cutesy way of describing how to build on a sure foundation. Build your life on a foundation that represents your deepest values. So, in the productivity pyramid is a kind of you start foundationally describing to yourself and really, really deeply getting into what matters most to you. And that gives you your governing values. Okay.
Got
You
it.
build a second, on a second level on those foundational values, your long range goals. What's going to, how are you going to fulfill those values in your life? You build on that the things you have to do to achieve those goals. What are the steps you have to take in your life to achieve those goals? And it's only at that point that you can describe what you're going to do on a day-to-day or weekly basis, right?
That pyramid, I guess, it's anchored. It really gives you kind of a line of sight
Yeah,
on what
yeah.
you can really line those up and know, hey,
And
I
and I
know.
think the problem that many people have is that they invert that pyramid.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They know deep down that there are things they want to do with their lives. But instead of building on that foundation, they actually start with their daily tasks.
Right.
And that's where you foul out. This is what I have to do today. Okay. And you haven't really thought through carefully whether what you have to do today matters all that much.
Isn't
Okay.
I'm with you there. Isn't it also, and you tell me if you think this has changed since retirement, but there seems like there's an agency and kind of a someone else being in charge of how your time and days spent versus
Exactly. Yeah.
you thoughtfully doing it. Even if you turn it upside down, somebody else versus you really
Right.
having that power.
Right. Right. And Dr. Covey used to say, and this is something I've always admired in his teaching, he would say, you have to decide for yourself what your burning yes is. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
What is your burning yes? Um, yes, to me, it has to burn inside. And if you have a burning yes inside, you can say no to a
Right.
lot of things, right?
Right.
Because you have that burning yes inside. People ask me if I'd like to be involved in this, that, or the other, and I say, It is the yes burn within me to do that,
Right.
right? Um,
And you can know that more quickly because you
I've
have
already
thought through
defined
this.
what that
Right.
is. Yeah, I've discovered and defined what governs me, what that burning yes is. You can feel free to say no if you have a burning yes inside.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you invert that pyramid and you start saying, whatever you say, boss, whatever you say, wife, whatever you say, husband, whatever you say, kids, um, then you have given your life over to a lot of whatevers, right?
Right.
And unless in my life, if it burns inside, this is something I have to say yes to because it comes from inside, then I can say no to a lot of things and have done. And in my work, all those years, John and you and I were working together, I'd say, um, for example, let's just take a quick, very pragmatic example. A customer comes in and says, "Can you help us do X?" And I would look at it, I'd say, "Well, that's that I don't feel intense desire to do X." Well, it would bring us a lot of money.
Right.
I say, we can make money in ways that matter to us. Okay. We don't have to do things that don't matter to us or that, frankly, we'd mess up.
Right.
Or we think we'd make a lot of money in the short term, but in the long term, it'll mess us up. Right. And we had
Right.
to make those decisions. But because we had governing values, we were able to prosper in the long term.
One of the things I noticed over 30 years of being around you, and you said it, how you value people. Is there, while you're talking about this, what insight do you have, or what is your feeling about what is in people? I think some people, I know most of our listeners, and maybe all of them, are really awesome at this. But by chance, if somebody hasn't seen this, I'm thinking, what do you think about what is really in people? What capability is in people? It seems like many of us, even those that are familiar with these principles, underestimate what is in us, the leader in us, the greatness in us. You've stated you have quite a high priority for people. I'm just curious about your view. I think that impacts how you see this model. How that can impact it. What do you think on that?
Well, for me, my governing value would be right at the base of my own productivity pyramid would be my love for others.
Hmm.
Do you mind if I don't know if you've told the story of the I-beam before.
No, share that with us.
Well, this comes from Hiram Smith, who founded Franklin. Um, when he was teaching a seminar, um, he would ask people to picture a long, narrow metal beam on the ground, just lying on the ground. And then he would hold up a $20 bill. That was 40 years ago. So maybe today he'd hold up $100 bill.
Several hundred.
Yeah, maybe thousands. I don't know. And he would ask a volunteer from the group if he would walk across the beam for the $20. Okay. And surprisingly, in one case, one of the participants said, "No, I wouldn't do that." Well, Hiram was surprised. "You mean you wouldn't walk across this thing for $20? It's only a few feet long." He said, "Okay, so would you do it for $100?" And the man said, "No." He was surprised again. He was startled. He took him up to 1,000 and then 10,000, and the man would not cross the beam for any amount of money. And the man said, surprisingly, he says, "I don't do anything for money." Well, that's that. This is an unusual person. Okay, Um, well, then he asked for another volunteer. He thought this guy isn't working for me. So he asked another volunteer to stand up and walk across the beam for $20. And he said to the second man, he said, "Do you have a child?" And the man said, "Yes, I have a small child." He said, "Okay, I'm going to change the scenario now. I am going to place the beam between two buildings 1,000 feet high." Have you ever seen the Petronas Towers in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur? They're
A
two
picture,
towers.
a picture of
Yeah, they're
them.
two towers that are identical, and there's this tiny little bridge between them, and it's like 1,000 feet from the ground. I thought, would I walk through that tunnel? But anyway, imagine you've got two towering buildings, and between them you have this beam. It's just a couple of feet wide, and you're standing on top of one building, and I'm standing on the top of the other one, and I'm holding in my hand your small child by his arm. And I tell you, I'm going to drop that child over the side if you do not cross the beam to get him. Would you do it?
Of
Well,
course,
the
you
man
would
said
attempt to do it.
unequivocally, yes.
Yes.
Well, then he turned to the other man, the man who said he wouldn't do anything for money, remember? He said, "If you were that guy, would you cross the beam?" He said, "Yes, I would." So here's the point. We all have things we value that are overwhelmingly important to us, right? The first man put hardly any value on money, but he put infinite value on his child. And he would give his life for that child. So the problem is, we don't always let that which is most deeply important to us govern what we do. The question is, what are you giving your life for? Okay,
Huge question.
huge question. So that's the question that you ask first in the Franklin Planner system. What would you give your life for?
That's the base of that
That's the
pyramid.
very base of the pyramid. Well, in Margot's case, um, she thought really hard about it, and she said, "I want to give my family high quality life. I want to give my customers the best quality service I can, and my employees the best quality experience. I even love quality music and food and clothing. I love quality." So, what do you think she wrote down? Quality. Because that word kind of summed up for her so much of what she cared about deeply. So, the question is, what would you put down there? What I like to teach people to do is to write down one word that kind of sums it all up. Maybe it's love. Um, maybe it's healing. Maybe it's money.
Right.
Okay. I'm not
And
going to
the
make a
beauty of
judgment
it
there.
is
Yeah, I'm not
you
going to
really have the
judge.
power to choose,
You
right?
decide. Okay. And I'm not going to judge what your values are. The question is, what would you cross the beam for?
Right.
And then, once you've written down a word, then we write down what we call a clarifying statement. Like when Margot wrote quality, then she wrote, the word sums up so much for me, right? Life, quality of life for my family, quality of life for my company, quality of life for my customers, et cetera, et cetera. So she wrote down this clarifying
Those
statement.
values seem to cut through the different roles or aspects of
Right.
her
All
life.
of her role, this particular value seemed to cut across all of her roles in life. And that's kind of helpful to think in terms of of your whole life, right? All of it.
I just want to ask you this. You've been doing this a long time. What percentage of people have you seen have actually taken the time to write this down, to think about this? Would What's your experience been?
I have absolutely no way of knowing, but I will say that the people that I believe take this quite seriously are people who are actually living up to what matters most to them.
Right.
I can think of a few examples um, of people. Um, for example, in my youth, I knew a teacher who I really admired. Everybody had a teacher that really made a difference in their life, and this guy did. And he had a dream of making his students, of seeing his students really excel and bloom and blossom. And he wasn't a time server. I'm sorry to say, but a lot of them are. He's not a mediocrity because he really works hard because his governing value was excellence.
Hmm.
He said, I don't care if we win. I don't care if you're the best in the world. What I care about is if we are as good as we can be. Okay.
What a
Then
great
he was
example.
satisfied with that. Yeah. Um, so that's an example. Um, you and I both know a really great human resources manager. Let's just call him Todd because that's his name. Okay. uh, it hurts him when people hurt. His governing value is seeing people uh, flourish and do well and heal if they need it. And it hurts him if people hurt. And so he spends his life building up and healing and encouraging and inspiring people. What a great guy. I
Yeah.
think he controls his life to that end. Okay. It's one thing to say, I control my life. It's another to say, I control my life to a certain end that matters most to me. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
he's leading, right? He's leading
Yeah.
his
He's
life. He's not
leading,
being led by
leading his
others.
life
And
instead of being led by
so
something else or someone else. Yeah.
Todd's a great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you could managers, okay, to human resources people. You can say, well, this person is a time server. You know, they handle the insurance, they handle this, they handle the hiring, they handle the onboard. This is what they do. Okay, they do that stuff. Then there's this guy I'm talking about, Todd, who loves those people, and his life is tied up in making sure that they succeed and heal when they need to. What a man.
Right.
So that's
Great.
that's foundation.
Another time we can go into more detail, but this is a question I get a lot, and we attempt to clarify. That base, we also fit in there values. We say mission, we say vision, and that's kind of in there.
Mhm.
Share like anything you would about still in that base, heavy, stable part of the pyramid, mission and vision. Any thoughts you have about that, Breck?
Some people are mission driven. We're going to the moon. Okay. That's a mission. Okay. We're going to build you know, the best catheter on the planet. Okay, that's a mission. Some people's missions to me seem kind of, well, let's say not the ones I would choose,
Right.
but I have a very good friend, for example, who is mission driven. Uh, he's a uh, he's a he's actually a symphony conductor friend, and he has this uh, this value in life that is not a mission. Okay, he doesn't see himself as mission driven. He sees himself as driven by experiences. Okay, for him to stand in front of a symphony orchestra and and bring from that orchestra the most incredible performance of, you know, Beethoven or whatever. I wouldn't say he's mission driven. I'd say he's experience driven.
Hmm.
So to me, this talk about mission, vision, and values and stuff is helpful. Will it apply to everybody? What's my mission in life? Can be very, very helpful to define for people. And in some ways, maybe we all should do that. Not necessarily fits everybody. Does that make, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
how
And
I
when
see it.
you put the word purpose there and mission, all of this seems to be some different
Well, mission to
angles.
me seems like
So what
I'm,
matters?
I'm going to the moon. Okay. And back, hopefully.
Purpose.
Um, Purpose is maybe an even more helpful word because, like I say, my friend, the conductor, his purpose is to have these great transcendent musical experiences in life. He doesn't have a mission to be the best conductor on the planet or anything like that. It's more like my purpose, my driving purpose is
Right.
great music. So,
Well,
okay.
if we have that in place, Breck, go go up that pyramid again with what Margot did.
Okay.
How,
Yeah. Well, you have that grounding in what matters most to you. And the guy who walked across the I-beam for his child, obviously his child is going to be very foundational in his vow. What he has to do now is think in terms of, okay, given that value, how do you see? What do you see 5, 10, 50 years from now in terms of your child? Um, or the guy who has the mission, like John F. Kennedy, when he said, we're going to the moon by the end of the decade and come back. Well, that's kind of because he announced that goal in 1961. It was he had 9 years to make that goal, right? It was a
right.
decade. It was actually time
It
bound.
was a lot to do still.
It was a great deal to do because at that point, America was putting up rockets that just blew up on the launch pad. I mean, we were no good at this.
Right.
At that point, we had to get really good at this. So at that point, once you decide whether your mission or purpose or whatever it is, once you've decided that, then you have to think in terms of uh, what does that look like, right? In practical, actual terms. Is it a year? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it your life? Okay. What is your long range goal or set of goals?
That makes sense.
So,
I saw a statistic, by the way. We've used it a few different times. There's more than one, but um, it said people who do articulate, write down, think about, make goals and write them down are 10 times more successful or more likely to succeed. That was one study, kind of that combination of even
for one thing,
establishing.
yeah, for one thing, they will know what success is,
Right,
right? You don't know what success is.
right,
Um, like your child, okay? Let's just take people with children, okay? Presumably, uh, their purpose in life is to have happy children, okay? Successful children, blah blah. I want my children to succeed. Well, what does success look like? In the case of a child, I would say you raise your children so that in 20 years they are healthy, they're well on their way to a productive and full a life that fulfills their potential. Um, so these long range goals will be fairly broad.
right.
Some long range goals can be a lot more precise, like going to the moon and coming back in 10 years. That's a precise long range goal. But in either case, whether it's very precise or very kind of broad ranging, you have to have it. You have to define what that is.
Hmm.
Um, let's take Margot, for example. She is a very customer oriented person. She wanted her customers to have a quality experience, right? And she found that only about a third of them on the customer satisfaction surveys were giving them a 10. That meant that two-thirds of them weren't.
Right.
So actually set a fairly precise goal that within 5 years, was it five? Maybe two, I don't know. She wanted that average to go up to 80% at least. So that's a big leap. So she gives herself a certain amount of time, like the NASA did in the 60s. Give herself a certain amount of time, decides what the start line is and what the finish line is, and make it pretty precise, right? Um, imagine yourself a 100-yard sprinter, okay? And you know that you can sprint that in, I have no idea, John, help me. Um, 10 seconds? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to do that in 10 seconds. Right now, it takes me 12. Okay. Well, I'm going to
Yeah.
shave 2 seconds off. That's what I mean by being precise
Yeah.
about a long range goal. So that's precision, right?
Right.
Go to the moon and back and within the decade, that's precision. Um, quality of life, maybe of your children's lives, maybe that's a little harder to measure. Um, but you can come up with fairly precise measures there too. You can say, for example, how much time are you actually spending with your children on a given day? It
Yeah.
might
Or
be
those
none.
grandchildren, right?
Yeah, it might be none, right? Why not take this goal of saying and being a little more precise about it and saying, well, this year I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day with each one.
Right.
For some of us, that's a lot. Okay. Um, and I want this to be going on for a year and see what happens. So, what goals would help you achieve what matters most in your life? That's the question at this level.
Right.
Don't make the mistake of setting a lot of goals, one, two, or three really significant goals, like Margot, customer goal, employee satisfaction goal, uh, children, family, quality time goal. Just okay, don't kill yourself. Just think in terms of one, two, or three
Right.
really, really important goals. They're important because you've said they were important in your foundational statement. Okay.
Right. And you're moving up now. So you got your values, your
Moving,
goals.
got your values, now you got your goals. Try and be precise about them.
You're putting them in writing. You're looking at
Yeah,
them daily. You're
yeah,
using the
yeah. You're
blessing of
reviewing
days
them.
and weeks.
Yeah, and
What talk to us about those top two in terms of days and weeks? I've had this thought that as we've kind of gone along in Franklin Planner, there was a point where we would say, hey, it's not just a calendar, but I've kind of returned to that. And I see almost a magical miracle in the way our lives are set up. Day and night, weeks and months are a beautiful structure. And so I've had this feeling, don't minimize the power of the calendar.
mhm.
And those top two, once you've got this anchor, seems so powerful if you kind of understand maybe what a weekly look and a daily look. Share with us your perspective on that, Breck.
Well, if you set a goal, say I'm going to lose 20 pounds by Easter, and you say, okay, that's my goal, and you, oh, well, you never check back, you never put
Yeah.
yourself on the scale. You have no idea. Okay, that's just ridiculous. I worked with a company once who the CEO got up at the beginning of the fiscal year and he gave everybody a binder, and this binder had 10 important goals for the company. Okay. And 6 months later, they had another company meeting. The binders were nowhere in sight. What happened to the binders? Nobody knew. But what was more important, nobody cared because everybody had forgotten about the binders.
Yeah.
The
I
binders were
follow you.
gathering dust in everybody's offices and nobody had ever looked at them again. Well, that's just ridiculous. That's not leadership. Okay. That's not leading a company or your life or anything. That's just ridiculous. So setting a goal and actually achieving it are two different things. Okay. And unless you control your schedule will just control you, and the binder will cease to be of any value at all or importance. Um, so say you have a couple of goals that really matter to you. You want to figure out what you're going to do to reach them. And in the Franklin Planner system, we call those intermediate steps. You can call them what you want, but it's a good little phrase. And
Right.
what's the intermediate step to get to the moon by the end of the decade?
And the step is it not, or the set of intermediate steps from where you are now
Yep,
to where this
yep,
goal takes you.
yeah. Or
And
where you
some things
where
are
you
easier to
where
measure
the
and some
yeah,
things
what
aren't.
success is. Yeah.
Right.
Once you define what success is, you have to decide what you're going to do to get there. Now that sounds so obvious, but people don't do it.
Right.
I mean, the binder disappeared from you know, everybody's view.
I saw another statistic that only 4%, this seems low, but there's some good research behind it. Only 4% of people consistently set goals like this and write them down with enough detail that you're referring to, uh, in a 4%. And
Yeah,
yet
well,
10 times the result. It seems that it's quite doable. Isn't that part of the vision? This is very doable by all of us.
because it becomes manageable. It's not overwhelming you, right? And furthermore, what's nice about it is that once you've set these things in and defined them carefully, then you can start saying no to other stuff. And
Right.
that's just as valuable, right? Okay.
Right.
So
And what about your energy and
yeah,
even
your
the
energy
function of
becomes
your
focus.
brain going to work on something that really you've chosen versus whatever somebody pushes in your way?
Yeah. Yeah. So your life becomes a lot of whatevers if you don't do this. Okay. So President John F. Kennedy died within 3 years of his inauguration. But the goal was so energizing,
Wow. The goal outlived him.
the goal outlived him. And they achieved it. By golly, they achieved it. But they wouldn't have achieved it if they hadn't sat down um, carefully the steps they had to take to get there.
Right.
And of course, there were a lot of steps, but one step would be, well, what steps do we have to take to keep the astronauts alive, right? So that
Right.
they can get there and back. So that would be life preserving steps. And other steps would be, how do we actually hit the moon? It's traveling really fast. We're traveling really fast. It's like a bullet hitting a bullet. How do we get there and back? So you have to take steps to navigate and back. Another would be, um, what steps do we have to take to finance this thing, right? Okay, so there are all kinds of steps you have to take, but if you don't sit down and you count the cost in terms of what steps you have to take to get there. And
Rick, let me ask you this. One of the great changes or additions to my life was when I joined Shipley, and I joined there as CFO, and you were a leader amongst the group, and but constantly there was this statement or truth or principle about what happens when you clarify your thinking in writing. What happens to the brain? What happens to the creativity? What happens to people, what happens to teams. You are one of the best in the world to comment on this. We've talked about brain science behind it and so on, but can you just share your view on this? Because you're an expert in this. What happens in the brain, in the person, in the motivation, in the team when you write things down and clarify it?
The all the science tells us that writing something down clarifies it for you, uh, it makes it possible for you to see exactly what you think. So
Yeah, otherwise
there's a
you don't
famous
know.
writer. There was a famous writer named E.M. Forster who said, "How do I know what I think until I see what I say?"
Yeah.
Okay. No, in other words, what you write down is the sort of the blood sample of your or the hair sample of your thinking. It makes it real to you. It enables you to focus your attention on it, and the more precise it is, when John F. Kennedy wrote down the goal, he said, "We are going to send a person to the moon and return them safely to Earth by the end of this decade." Now, when he wrote that down, people said, "Oh, all of a sudden we can focus." What if he had stood up and said, "We're going to lead the world in space travel"? Oh, that
Mm.
sounds very aspirational, but what the heck does it
So
mean?
general, right.
Yeah, it's too general. Your thinking is too vague and too it's useless thinking. Okay. And how many times have you heard great business leaders, so called, say, "We're going to lead the world in such and such. We're going to lead the world in catheters." And you say,
Right.
"Well, what is that? Please help me understand what that means.
Right.
Make it precise, and then help me understand what I need to do to get there." That's leadership. Okay.
That's powerful. Now, Breck, as people have used the planner, and then as technology has, I guess you would say, expanded because the planner, writing paper, the mindset, the skills, all of that comes together under the definition of technology long before digital, smartphones came along. And some people shifted, many people shifted. We saw away from digital. You've studied this. Can you share with us how do you approach these different technologies? The technology of paper, the technology of a phone or apps. When you're, I mean, we all are overwhelmed with digital technology. But yeah, I know you've studied this. Help us, because that's a big part of this whole pyramid, right? How we approach this, given the environment we're in, the circumstance we're in, and what we need to do. And it's almost like the digital technology and overwhelm cannot be ignored. So if we talk about these principles and this model, without that, it seems like something's missing. Help us there.
Um, I was going to say that listening to your question there, I've watched students in college. I was a college teacher. I watched them when they started bringing. I'm kind of old now. Okay, when they started bringing,
You're a young but
yeah,
experienced man.
yeah, but I'm talking about like 20, 30 years ago. They started bringing their laptops into the classroom. And the interesting thing about that was that they would start to take notes. And I got interested in what they were doing. And they would simply write down everything I said. Eh, A lot of them would. And so you get a lot of, so you heard a lot of tapping. Okay. Um, and it eventually it came clear to me that they weren't really listening. They were making a record of what I said.
Wow.
But oddly enough, they weren't digesting it. And I could tell
They weren't engaged in.
they weren't engaged in learning what I was teaching them. They were engaged in making a recording. And I thought, well,
Interesting.
why don't they just send in a tape recorder or a voice recorder or a phone, turn it on to the recorder, and then leave? Because that's all they need to do. They don't even need to be here. And So something was going on, something was going wrong. And what I think was going wrong was that they simply were not um, digesting it. It was like they were eating food that wouldn't nourish.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, they were maybe just repeating. And so,
Yeah, it was like empty calories. And so, what I tried to encourage them to do, and there's a lot of science behind this. There's something called the Princeton method, which is a way of taking notes, for example. I tried to encourage them to, instead of making a word for word record of what I was saying, which simply made their minds focus on the mechanics. Okay. Try to encourage them to use paper, to write down what struck them as
put pen
important.
and pencil to paper,
Yeah,
tangibly
pen and
write it
pencil to
down.
paper and write down what struck them as being important. And we talked about what strikes you as being important. And I would ask them at the end of the class period, I'd say, okay, we've talked about such and such. What struck you as important from our discussion?
Right.
If they were simply mechanically recording it, they could not answer that question because they weren't digesting it.
Breck, this is so fascinating. As you've built this model out, will you take us further into the top two sections of the productivity pyramid, weekly and daily perspective there?
Yeah. In defining the intermediate steps you have to take to achieve your goals, um, we have to remember that reaching a goal is pretty much out of our control. Think about it. Okay. I need to lose 20 pounds. Well, I can't just chop 20 pounds off my body. I suppose I could, but that'd be bloody. Um, Reaching a goal is generally outside your control. Think about that. You can set a goal to increase sales by a certain percentage, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get there because it's not in your control. So you need to decide what you can control. And that's what your steps are. Okay. You can't say, suppose you're a salesperson. Um, you can't say, I will close at least one major sale each week. You can't make a goal like that because you can't control what other people do. You can't control whether they will. You can say, I'm going to force you to close on this. You can't do that. What you can do, that's what you focus on. So the steps you take are things that are in your control. For example, I will contact 5 key clients this week. I can control that. I can't control whether I can close them, but I can control what I do. I can control what I do. So examine your goals and decide on one or two or maybe 3 intermediate steps that you can take to reach the goal, that steps that you control. And then you take your planner and you schedule those steps into your calendar. Okay. This week I will contact 5 key clients. Okay. Now that's straightforward. You can control it. It's in your planner. And instead of letting the schedule control you, you're controlling it yourself.
And the power isn't the power of those small things done consistently that are within your control. The power of that has been proven to be phenomenal in terms
Over
of
and over again. Yes.
actually some way getting achievement of the goal or close to the goal.
Yeah.
And so while it may feel like that goal's out of your control, when you focus on what you
Yeah.
can control, suddenly
Yeah.
that goal that seemed
Yeah.
unrealistic but was stretched,
Yeah.
my gosh, you accomplish it.
Yeah. And this is where this is the difference between leadership and phony leadership. A phony sales manager, he looks at the stuff that, okay, we sold 20 cars this week. We know we should have sold 40. What does he do? What does a phony manager do? He gets on his phone and he calls all the dealerships. He says, sell more, work harder, do better. Okay, well, that's phony. He doesn't have any intermediate steps. He doesn't what he should be doing is, if he's a real leader, he says, what can we do that we can control that will enable us to get to 40 cars a week? Let's experiment and find out. And so the steps become kind of a creative thing. You discover what it takes. And maybe you find out that in one dealership they make 40 calls a week. And it turns out that they sell more. Well, let's everybody try that. That's what leadership is. Leadership is experimentation on intermediate steps, above and beyond the foundational stuff. And then you go to the third level of the pyramid, which is making your weeks productive instead of just being busy. Okay. Um, Once a week, and this is something that Dr. Covey really, really emphasized. Close the door on everybody, close the door on everything, and be alone with your planner for 15 minutes or longer. And reread your governing values. Evaluate your goals. How are you doing? How are you getting closer to the goal? Third, evaluate your intermediate steps. Are they working? Are you, we need, okay, the goal is to sell 40 cars a week. Are the things we're doing working to get there? Instead of just picking up the phone and saying, sell more, okay, you're sitting down saying, is what we're doing working? Are these steps that we're taking actually working? Do they actually support the goals? Do you need to take different steps? And write down your answers. Don't just think about it. Okay. And finally, that's when you decide what you're going to do this week. You give your intermediate steps the priority. You don't let stuff interfere with those things. Now, there will always be stuff. Okay. There are fires to put out. Somebody got sick. Somebody's dead. We got a new hire. There are all kinds of things that impinge, right?
Right.
But if you plan your life around the intermediate steps, instead of trying to fit those steps in with everything else, okay, that's where you give your priority. Then you can say no to a lot of things that would otherwise control you. Okay.
I see the link. I'm getting this. So I see the link, your values, which seem timeless, and then to
And then you go to
goals,
your daily
intermediate.
tasks.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Your
then to the
daily
week.
tasks or the weekly tasks. That's when the rubber hits the road and you say, um, you allocate prime time to those steps. And you schedule everything else around those steps, but they don't take over for the steps. Instead of running around putting out fires, you delegate emergencies to other people. You say, no, I can't do that. No, I would like to be able to help you, but I have a priority that, okay. So you stay on top of it. And so if the dog gets sick, that may be, you may have to deal with that. Okay.
Right.
But that should be an outlier in your life, but your intermediate steps never lose their priority because you are dealing with them in writing every week, every day. So in your planner, you can see the whole thing. You can see your governing values, you can see your goals, you can see your intermediate steps, and you have your and you've calendared them so that other things don't impinge on them. And that is the magic of the system. Your planner is your best tool for helping you stay focused on what matters most.
Wow, that's
Now,
powerful.
remember that the planner will not ring you, it will not buzz you, it will not distract you, but it does
It
keep you
cannot be hacked.
engaged. No, can't be hacked. Um, but when it comes to living a life that's fulfilling and accomplishing what matters most to you, this system is really powerful. And like the old man in the commercial at night, it will change your life. Okay. All right.
Well, we have actually. millions of people and
Yes,
almost 40 years of testimony to what you've talked about here, Breck,
sure.
and the importance of putting in writing and the power of focusing on what you can control. And I heard it in what you said, but this there is greatness in everyone, right? There is the power to do this in everyone. There is the power to decide what matters to you and draw that out and lead your life. And as you go from values, those governing values, to goals, to intermediate steps, to look at the week, and then kind of simply you're able to know your priorities for the day. That is the power you're talking about. You've had a lot of experience doing that. What is the feeling that goes with that when you're able to do that each day, each week, and maybe through the day? I mean, how Margot is your example, but for you and Margot, what would you say is a big benefit to how you feel?
Uh, if you um, if you let urgencies and emergencies and the distractions of the moment govern your life, you're going to feel like crap. Um, one of the things that really worries me is this tendency, particularly among young people, to doom scroll, to let the screen govern their lives, and moving quickly from one trivial thing to another or one game to another. And I see lives literally being burned up by this kind of wasteful, destructive behavior. It's really quite disturbing. The antidote to that is the planner system, something like it, that enables you to align your daily activities with your deepest values, and you will then feel at peace and you'll feel excited about your life. Otherwise, you will feel a vague self disgust.
Wow.
Does that help?
Yeah, so powerful. So powerful. Well, Breck, this has been amazing. Now we're going to need to invite you back, but let's just see. Can you, as we bring this to a close, can you just share any summary thoughts or invitations or insights you have for our listeners? And we promise to invite you back. There's more to talk about. Thank you for the story of Margot. Thank you for outlining the pyramid, the benefits, and giving several examples. What would you share with us as we kind of wrap up this great podcast together?
I just want to put a plug in for the planner. It's the best. The planner system is a way of thinking about your life and getting control of it in such a way that you achieve the ends that matter most to you. And the planner itself is the best tool I can think of for helping you to stay focused. And so that you do end up living a life that you can feel excited by and that you can feel peaceful about. Does that
Wonderful.
help? Is that good?
That is powerful. And you just said it right there. There's a promise that goes with that, the peace to gain control and to really tap into your greatness. Well, thank you, Dr. Breck England, for joining us. We invite everyone to check out our show notes and follow us. And we look forward to our time together next time. And Breck will invite you back. So thank you for everyone for being together. Thanks again to you, Breck.
It's a pleasure.